Welcome to Tiny Storytime YT channel. Daily updates with satisfying stories. Remember to subscribe. During the earthquake, I held on to Logan, who was rushing in to save the girl he loved. Because of that, I ended up losing my leg. Later, on the day Logan and I got married, that girl, disfigured and devastated, jumped to her death. Logan never said a word about it. For decades, he helped me rehabilitate my injured leg as if it were routine. On our 10th wedding anniversary, while I was pregnant, he pushed me into the middle of the road. Before turning to leave, he looked back and asked me, "Emma Carter, do you now know what it feels like to be utterly helpless?" As the car crushed my body, I finally realized he had hated me all along. When I opened my eyes again, I had been reborn, back to the moment when the building was collapsing. This time, I let go of Logan's hand. "Logan, run," I yelled. When the load-bearing wall came crashing down, Logan resolutely pulled away from me. I froze mid-step, staring at him through the choking dust. In my previous life, I had dragged him back with all my strength, shielding him with my body from the falling debris. The sharp stones piercing my skin brought excruciating pain that made me think I was about to die. With my last ounce of strength, I whispered in his ear, "Logan, you must be happy." When I woke up in the hospital, I found that I only had half of my right leg left. I couldn't describe how I felt at that moment, realizing I could never return to the fencing career I loved so much. I broke down in despair, crying uncontrollably. Logan's mother came to see me then. She and Logan knelt on the ground, begging me to stop crying. They said they wouldn't stand until I did. That bright, cheerful boy, who always seemed so full of life, stood beside me, helpless. His trembling hand wiped my tears away. "Emma, let's get married," he said. "I'll take care of you for the rest of my life." For a brief moment, his words eased the pain in my heart, filling the empty void within me. I thought the deep gaze Logan had when he looked at me was love, awakened by my sacrifice. It wasn't until the car crushed my abdomen years later that I understood. That gaze was pure, unadulterated hatred. His face turned deathly pale as he collapsed backward, finally silenced. This time, it didn't seem like he was faking. The medical staff rushed over in a panic to attend to him, but I turned away and walked into the examination room across the hall. The results came back normal, so I left the hospital without a second thought. As I was leaving, I heard news about Logan. Apparently, his life had been saved, but his arm had to be amputated. Fate had shifted this time. The injured one was him, and the person who saved their lover was also him. I could only hope that Autumn would stay by his side and walk the path ahead with him. I stood outside the ICU, staring at the flashing red light. Images of Autumn from my previous life floated through my mind. I remembered how, when the walls were shaking and everyone else was running for their lives, Autumn held his phone tightly, his tone firm and unyielding. "Say you love me, or I'll die here. If you don't promise me, Emma, I won't leave." I had seen him break up and reconcile countless times with his senior in the directing department. I had also heard him laugh mockingly with his companions, saying, "Logan, I'm just playing around with him. If I don't stir things up a bit, how would he know what heartbreak feels like?" Even knowing all this, I still tried to stop Logan, hoping to pull him out of a relationship that would only destroy him. Even when he threw me aside for someone else, I couldn't let go of our years of friendship. But if he was so determined to leap into the flames, just as he said, life and death are fated, and fortune lies in the heavens, then who was I to interfere? The next time I saw Logan was 11 months later. The right hand he had once been so proud of, the one that had won him countless basketball games, was now gone. His arm was amputated, leaving only a short stump wrapped in bandages. He moved with great difficulty, and his mother seemed to have aged 10 years. His voice, once strong and vibrant, had faded to a hoarse whisper, barely audible. I brought a bouquet of flowers to greet him as he was discharged. Calmly, I told him we were breaking up. Logan didn't try to stop me. During his recovery, Autumn had visited him many times, sobbing and professing his love. He swore he would stay by Logan's side forever. Perhaps this was the best ending for all of us. After Logan left, I stood in his empty hospital room, lost in thought. This was the same room I had stayed in during my previous life, back when I believed Logan could save me. Now, I understood that the only person who could save me was myself. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something unexpected. I had thought I'd see Logan and Autumn together, but instead, I saw Autumn in the arms of another man, Xavier. The two were locked in a passionate kiss, oblivious to the world around them. Suddenly, my phone rang, breaking my train of thought. I glanced at the caller ID. It was my mom. I answered the call, but my eyes stayed fixed on the scene below. Logan, unaware of what had just transpired, stood holding a bright bouquet of roses. Autumn had already rushed into his arms, her face lit with a radiant smile. "Hello, Mom," I said, my tone calm, though my gaze never wavered from the figures below. Logan tried to embrace Autumn, but his missing limb made it an awkward, painful struggle. He finally gave up. "Where have you been, Emma?" Mom's voice was anxious. Her words hurried. In my previous life, when I lost my leg, Mom had been devastated. Yet, even then, she never blamed Logan. After we got married, she had quietly voiced her concerns to me a few times. "Logan has a deep and complicated mind," she'd said. "I don't know if he's the right choice for you." But I had dismissed her concerns. Logan had always been so gentle and obedient in front of her, so tender toward me. We'd even argued over it, with me insisting that she was overthinking. Only after being reborn did I realize it wasn't overthinking. It was intuition, born of love. If I had listened to her earlier, maybe things would have turned out differently. "Don't worry, Mom," I replied, softening my tone. "I've already said goodbye to Logan." As I spoke, a chill ran through me. Not far away, I saw Xavier, his hands casually in his pockets, standing amidst the flowers. He looked up at me, his piercing gaze locking with mine. A sly, dangerous smile curved his lips as he raised a finger to his mouth in a shushing gesture, as if warning me not to speak. Someone like Xavier, with his magnetic charm, was bound to have admirers. Even among the dazzling stars of the performing arts department, he stood out. His long, narrow eyes seemed to hold galaxies, captivating anyone who dared meet his gaze. Rumor had it that several famous directors had already offered Xavier roles in their films, but he turned them all down. He claimed he was saving his debut for Autumn, but in our previous life, fate had other plans. During the earthquake, Xavier's perfect face was scarred, his appearance ruined. Back then, Logan had abandoned me during my post-surgery recovery to secretly visit Xavier. But Xavier refused to see him every time. Logan thought it was because Xavier was ashamed of his disfigurement or because I had forced Logan to marry me. He never knew that on the day Xavier jumped, he had posted a photo online. In the picture, Xavier held another girl's hand, their fingers tightly intertwined, their happiness evident. No matter how hard I tried to compensate for Logan's regrets over Autumn in the 10 years after losing my leg, he still blamed all his suffering on me. Now, I could only laugh bitterly. Looking back, my obsessive devotion to Logan was no different from his blind, reckless love for someone who never truly cared about him. When I returned to campus, much of the school had been rebuilt. We were approaching graduation. Everyone was busy submitting resumes. In my previous life, Logan had been outstanding in every aspect. With his sharp features and confident demeanor, he stood out in any crowd, quickly capturing the attention of HR representatives. But now, all he could do was sit in front of small, unnoticed companies, awkwardly scrawling his name with his clumsy left hand. Though the interviewers didn't say anything outright, the pity in their eyes far outweighed any admiration. The despair I felt in my previous life, faced with judgmental stares, was now something Logan had to endure. "Emma, I'd like to ask your perspective on balancing career and family," the interviewer said, holding my resume and looking at me with interest. It wasn't unusual for young single women to face questions like this during job interviews. I understood that. I turned my head, my mind flickering through memories. After a brief pause, I answered firmly, "I was born to be a mountain, not a stream." The interviewer blinked in surprise. But soon, a warm smile spread across their face, and they nodded approvingly. "All right, Emma, one last question. You've applied for a position as a wheelchair fencing coach. Could you tell us why this role holds special meaning for you? Beneath the table, my hand rested lightly on my right knee as I slowly rotated my ankle. The joy of regaining what I had once lost still lingered in my heart. In my previous life, I had encountered countless obstacles. I had grown to despise the fencing I once loved. Every time I saw a fencing competition on TV, I would smash the screen in a frenzy. It was only much later, when my emotions had calmed, that I began to explore wheelchair fencing. The female coach I met back then handed me a sword and said, "You've lost your leg, but if you grow wings, you can still fly." Unfortunately, by then, my physical condition had deteriorated, making it nearly impossible to pursue that dream again. Now, with this second chance, I understood the pain I had endured. I wanted more people to experience the joy of life with me. Faster, higher, farther is not just a motto, it's a mindset. Physical limitations should never confine someone's pursuit of their dreams. Those were the words of my coach in my past life, and they had become a late comfort to my soul. As the interview ended, I saw Logan and Autumn. She stood close to him, her presence strikingly noticeable. "Logan, don't worry," she said in a sweet, coaxing tone. "It's okay if you don't have a job. I'll take care of you forever." Hearing those familiar words, I couldn't help but smile faintly. "I'll ask someone I know to get you a job," she continued. "Something easy, with good pay. I don't need your help." Logan snapped, his voice firm. "Why would no company want me? Just give me some time. Autumn, trust me." It was obvious that Autumn didn't truly care for Logan. Her kindness toward him was likely just a way to avoid public criticism. But Logan, once the golden boy, couldn't stomach the idea of accepting charity from a girl. Even now, he clung to the belief that he could still make a name for himself. However, his past decisions had left a glaring stain on his record, like skipping a major exam to accompany Autumn to a competition. That, coupled with the long road to physical recovery, meant Logan had lost the extraordinary advantage he once had when entering the workforce. Reaching his previous heights would now require an unimaginable amount of effort. As I walked past them, I heard Logan deliberately raise his voice. "Autumn, I'll make you happy. I promise." From the corner of my eye, I saw him wrap his arm around her waist, his gaze fleetingly drifting in my direction. I pretended not to notice and kept walking, memories tugging at my mind. I remembered the 18-year-old boy who had waited outside my home all night, holding a jar of paper stars. His voice had trembled as he said, "Emma Carter, we got into the same college. Can we be together? I swear, I'll make you happy." Closing my eyes, I could still see the snowy willow trees and his sweat-soaked white shirt. We had worked so hard to be together, only to be defeated by time. "Emma," a cheerful voice broke through my thoughts. Turning, I saw Luna skipping toward me, throwing herself into my arms. "Be in my graduation film," she exclaimed. I had met Luna in the drama club. Coming from a wealthy family, she was set to study abroad after graduation. Her biggest problem, right now, was completing her final project, a short film. I linked my arm with hers and nodded. "All right," I said, perhaps worried that I'd be upset over my breakup. Luna intentionally positioned herself on my right, blocking my view of Logan and Autumn. "Logan's mom caused a big scene at school the other day," Luna said casually. "She told Autumn that Logan belongs to the Lin family, alive or dead, and demanded that she give him a grandson. Anyone would break down with a mother-in-law like that," Luna added, sneaking a glance at my face. "Luna, I've already broken up with Logan," I replied calmly. "I don't want to hear anything about him anymore." I was at a major turning point in my life. There were far more important things than love, and I had no intention of letting someone I would never reconnect with disrupt my world again. Luna's script was inspired by a real-life school principal from a rural mountain village. I was cast as a young woman forced to abandon her studies due to family pressure to marry. It wasn't until rehearsals began that I noticed we were working next door to Xavier's group. In his script, the female lead was played by Autumn. The two of them spent every day together, their ambiguous relationship well known across campus. But given Xavier's family background, no one dared to gossip openly. Logan had received some positive responses from companies during his job search, but for some reason, All communication had abruptly ceased. Logan eventually accepted Autumn's arrangement and used her connections to join a company. It was said the pay was decent, but it also meant he had to swallow his pride and become the very kind of person he once despised. A beneficiary of nepotism. By this point in my previous life, he would have been undergoing physical rehabilitation, one of the hardest periods of recovery. It involved coming to terms with his new reality, facing his deepest wounds over and over again. Logan's emotional state began to destabilize, and he leaned heavily on Autumn to fill the void in his heart. But Autumn's attention wasn't on him at all. To ensure he looked his best on camera, Autumn maintained a strict routine of early nights and early mornings. Perhaps it was the glow of being immersed in love, but he seemed even more radiant than before. During rehearsal breaks, I often overheard Autumn impatiently saying on the phone, "I told you I'm busy. The crew has a meeting tonight. I don't have time to go with you." Sometimes, when Logan showed up to see him, Autumn would make excuses to leave, even instructing those around him, "Don't tell him I'm here." On Valentine's Day, Logan came with flowers to see Autumn, but Autumn was busy rehearsing and didn't even greet him. Frustrated and humiliated, Logan finally lost his temper in front of everyone. He threw the bouquet to the ground and yelled, "I've called you so many times, and you didn't answer. What are you trying to do?" The room fell silent. Autumn, however, didn't bother to hide his irritation. Having always been surrounded by admirers, he wasn't used to being spoken to like this. "Logan," he retorted, his voice sharp, "I'm busy. Normal people have a lot to do every day. Not everyone is as free as you." He emphasized normal people, the words cutting deeply into Logan. Logan stood there, his face pale, struggling to form words. "Do you even have a heart, Autumn?" He finally burst out, "I became like this because of you. Do you have any shame?" "I never asked you to save me," Autumn shot back, unflinching. "If you hadn't come, maybe I would have been fine. Why should I owe you anything? Don't forget, I was the one who got you that job. I don't owe you a thing." Logan's breathing quickened, and in his anger, he instinctively raised his hand to point at Autumn, but all he could do was wave his empty sleeve. The motion threw him off balance, and he nearly tripped over a chair. From a distance, I watched Logan, once the prodigy admired by teachers, standing defeated in the middle of the crowd, bearing the weight of humiliation and betrayal. I lowered my gaze, unable to watch any longer. Only after losing something does one truly understand its value. Autumn, always protected and shielded, would never realize how much worse off he would have been without Logan. And Logan would never understand that if I hadn't pulled him back that day, his fate might have been even worse. It was no surprise Logan didn't thank me in the past, just as Autumn didn't thank him now. That day's rehearsal was thrown into disarray. After everyone left, I stayed behind to practice my moves. In the short film, I played a martial artist who had left the mountains, performing fencing techniques at the end of the movie. But after being reborn, my movements were rusty, and I had to practice repeatedly to regain my skill. Eventually, the stage lights dimmed. In the faint glow, I raised my sword and lunged forward, only to suddenly notice a shadowy figure sitting in the audience. "Who's there?" called out, startled, almost dropping my sword. "You're quite skilled," a familiar voice replied. It was Xavier. His dark eyes gleamed in the dim light, almost ghostly. "Logan doesn't deserve you," he said plainly. I assumed he was here to warn me to keep quiet about what I'd seen earlier. So, I spoke first. "If you're worried about me saying anything about you and Autumn, don't be. I won't." He laughed softly, his expression easing into a relaxed, slightly intoxicated smile. "Autumn isn't the right fit. You'd make a much better lead." He stepped closer, the scent of alcohol and perfume lingering around him. "You're tough, like wild grass," he said, his tone low and almost teasing. I frowned and stepped back. Xavier had always considered himself an artist, with his family's wealth giving him an air of arrogance. Women around him often tolerated his advances for their own reasons. But I wasn't one of them. "I don't need anyone to validate me," I said coldly. "My choices are my own, and they're none of your business." I began removing my costume, intending to leave, But Xavier grabbed my sleeve and pulled me back. Emma Carter, he said softly, has anyone ever told you that you're different? If we were together, don't you think Logan would be devastated? Wouldn't you like to see him come crawling back to you? For a fleeting moment, I was tempted, but I quickly suppressed the thought. I didn't need a man's pursuit to prove my worth, nor did I need anyone's regret to affirm I was good enough. My worth doesn't depend on any man or woman. I said firmly, I don't want anything more to do with Logan, and if you bother me again, I won't hesitate to make everything I know public. It won't end well for you, either. With that, I removed my costume, turned, and left the theater. After that day, Logan and Autumn began a cold war. Logan stopped visiting the theater to see him. Logan stopped appearing on campus with Autumn. He thought this was a form of punishment for Autumn, but little did he know it was exactly what Autumn had hoped for. On my birthday, Luna gathered the entire crew to celebrate with me. While we were at the restaurant, I received a nameless text message. Happy birthday, Emma. The use of that name immediately reminded me of Logan. In the first love letter he wrote to me at 17, he had addressed me the same way. But without hesitation, I pressed delete. After leaving the restaurant, I walked back to campus surrounded by friends. I had drunk a little too much, and a few of the boys walking beside me tried to steady me but hesitated, pulling back their hands. I noticed but didn't say anything. Under a street lamp, I spotted a tall, thin figure silently standing in the distance. One of the boys noticed first and discreetly stepped aside. Happy birthday. Logan's voice was calm, but I could hear the emotion he was holding back. After a brief exchange, I nodded. Thank you. In his left hand, he held a poorly folded bouquet of paper stars. When he took a step forward, I took a step back. The cold wind howled, scattering the paper stars across the ground. Neither of us bent down to pick them up. I'm heading to Beijing for a fitting soon, he said, his tone carrying a faint note of grievance. During the 4 years we were together, I had never missed a single significant event in his life. Through all his tough times, I had always stood by his side. I remembered our sophomore year when he fell off his bike and injured his arm. Blood soaked through his shirt. Yet he still silently brought me the birthday cake he had prepared. But the moment I rolled up his sleeve to check his wound, the tall, proud boy burst into tears, pouting like a child. That once arrogant figure had been reduced to nothing but vulnerability in front of me. Now, though, I wouldn't be there for him during his darkest days. Good luck, I said coldly, my expression completely devoid of warmth. Emma, he called out, his voice trembling. How can you be so heartless? Can't we even be friends anymore? Some of the people nearby glanced over, their eyes filled with curiosity and suspicion. I looked straight at him, unwavering. Logan, don't call me that. You don't deserve to. You think this is old love rekindling, but it's just your need for comfort after being abandoned and neglected. You should know that someone like me cannot tolerate even the slightest betrayal. When you chose to throw me aside, you should have understood. We can never be friends again. I took a step closer, lowering my voice to keep others from hearing. Don't think you can use some false pretense of deep affection to manipulate me. Life and death are fated. Logan, that was your choice, and you'll have to live with it. I smiled faintly and turned away, rejoining my friends as we walked off together. As graduation approached, the days flew by. Between rehearsals, a month passed in the blink of an eye. Xavier had begun sending me expensive gifts every now and then. Sometimes it was a designer ring hidden in my bag, or a limited edition dress that was impossible to buy. I knew this wasn't love at first sight. It was just a game for Xavier, something to pass the time. I ignored him. I had already received an offer to work as a coach for the provincial fencing team. According to the plan, I would start training a newly formed team soon. 3 months later, I was set to lead them to a major competition. On Autumn's birthday, Logan suddenly reappeared. He arrived with his mother, sporting a newly fitted prosthetic arm. They had deliberately chosen this day, likely hoping to break the ice and surprise Autumn. Logan's mother was the one who told me all of this. After everything that had happened, she seemed more worn down but was uncharacteristically gentle toward me. Emma, she said, her tone soft. Logan is like a child who never grew up. He always needs someone to take care of him. You've known him for so many years, you know what he's like. He can be impulsive, but he's sentimental at heart. In my previous life, she had said similar things to other women after Logan and I were married. The implied meaning was obvious, and hearing it now only made me feel disgusted. No one stays a child forever. I replied. He's a grown man and should take responsibility for his actions. As for whether he's sentimental or not, that's none of my business. He has a girlfriend now, and you should be speaking to her, not me. I turned to leave, but Logan's mother grabbed my arm. Emma, I'm saying this because I think you're a good match for him. Otherwise, you know as well as I do, he and that girl get along just fine. He even has a job now. To be blunt, if Logan hadn't lost his arm, you wouldn't even have had this chance. Her tone was still full of pride when she spoke about her son. It was clear Logan hadn't told her about using connections to get his job or his arguments with Autumn. Logan's mother didn't truly like me. She just thought Autumn was too unreliable and wanted me to clean up the mess. I wasn't unfamiliar with Logan's mother's attitude, so I wasn't surprised. What did pique my curiosity was how someone like her, unable to tolerate the slightest grievance, would clash with someone as entitled as Autumn. Would sparks fly? I could only hope they succeeded in their happily ever after. Good luck to them, I said with mock sincerity. You don't need to waste your time trying to pair us up. I don't deserve your precious son. Logan's mother snorted in disdain, grabbed her bag, and stormed toward the door. But as she reached out her hand, I noticed her fingers, rounded and swollen like drumsticks, a clear sign of clubbing, indicative of severe heart issues. I immediately held back any further harsh words, worried that continuing would only upset her more. Just as she opened the door to leave, Logan's voice floated in from the hallway, accompanied by boisterous laughter from a group of people. I crouched down, pretending to tidy up some props. Luna came over and told me that Logan had booked a large restaurant, and many people from both production teams had gone to join the party. I had no intention of attending. After packing my things, I left the theater. These days, I spent my time coaching at the provincial team and had no interest in keeping up with these dramas. As I reached the school gate, an ambulance rushed past me, heading toward the performance hall. Groups of students were running in the same direction, their voices filled with excitement and urgency. Hurry! I heard a senior from the acting department was caught cheating on her boyfriend. The rest of the story, I heard from Luna later. That day, a crowd had gathered around Logan and his mother as they eagerly pushed open the dressing room door. What they found inside was Autumn and Xavier, disheveled and embracing. They were deeply engaged, Luna said, quoting a literary phrase with dramatic flair. Completely unaware of the world around them, Logan froze in place, utterly stunned, unable to utter a word. His mother, on the other hand, turned pale with rage. She charged at Autumn, grabbing his hair and trying to hit him. Autumn retaliated with a swift kick to her chest, sending her sprawling to the ground. Logan tried to intervene, grappling with Xavier in a chaotic scuffle. The entire scene was recorded by someone in the crowd who had been holding up a camera, hoping to capture a surprise video. I waved a hand to signal Luna that I didn't want to hear more, but she continued regardless. That's not all, she exclaimed. In the chaos, someone pushed Autumn, and he fell to the ground, bleeding heavily. I choked on the water I had just sipped, coughing in disbelief. Apparently, Autumn was 3 months pregnant. He lost the baby. I was utterly shocked. Doing the math, Logan and Autumn hadn't even been together for 3 months. I couldn't imagine how Logan would react upon learning this news. Logan's mother had also been hospitalized after the incident. She had suffered a heart attack and was barely saved. She was still in the ICU. Emma, you're so lucky, Luna said, shaking her head. Breaking up with Logan was the best decision you ever made. Look at the mess they're in now. Don't you dare get involved. She continued passionately, her words a bit sharp but clearly spoken out of loyalty to me. Logan was only ever successful because he was with you. He never appreciated it. Serves him right to end up like this. All right, Luna, I interrupted gently. Let's not bring up Logan anymore. To me, he's just someone I've known for a long time. Nothing more. To change the subject, I pulled out my phone. Look at this, I said, showing her a video of one of my students. The screen displayed a young girl, paralyzed and wheelchair-bound, confidently raising her sword and landing a flawless thrust against her opponent. Before joining our team, she had nearly succumbed to her parents' pressure to marry a deaf-mute man she had never met. Learning fencing had given her the courage to stand up to her family and say no. "Emma, you're amazing," Luna said, her eyes misty with tears as she hugged me tightly. "When I become a director, I'll make a movie about your story." Graduation assessments arrived as scheduled. Luna's short film was a great success. In the final scene, a group of girls clasped hands, reciting loudly, "I was born to be a mountain, not a stream." As their voices echoed, I donned my fencing gear and demonstrated my swordsmanship on stage. In that moment, atop the figurative peak, I looked down on the mundane struggles I had once endured. A flash of imagery crossed my mind: a speeding car, a woman sitting helplessly in a wheelchair, her tearful eyes filled with despair as she murmured, "Help me. Someone. Please save me." Across the uncrossable chasm of time, I answered her question. "I'm here to save you. I can save you." And with that, the chaos of traffic noise faded. The swell in my stomach calmed. I regained my legs and stood tall once more amidst the billowing dust. Pulling myself to safety, reborn, I vowed to love myself properly this time. The audience erupted into thunderous applause. Among the crowd, I saw Logan. He sat there, tears streaming down his face, completely overwhelmed. The first person to stand and present me with flowers was, surprisingly, Xavier. I watched as he carried a bouquet so large it nearly obscured him entirely. Walking toward me, "Emma Carter, you're stunning today," he said, his voice smooth. At the center of the bouquet was a card with bold words. "Emma Carter, I like you." But I didn't take the flowers. In the end, Luna stepped forward as the event organizer and accepted them on my behalf. "Thank you for your support," she replied politely. As I packed my belongings backstage, a figure appeared at the door, staring at me. When I turned, it was Logan. He approached slowly, opening his arms with visible effort. "Emma, we're about to graduate. Can I hug you?" We both knew that after this moment, we would likely never see each other again. Seeing the mechanical arm peeking out from his sleeve, I softened just a little. "Emma," he choked, his voice trembling, "be happy. In this second chance at life." Those were the very words he said to me. How ironic. Fate had truly played its hand, twisting our paths in such unexpected ways. If you had pulled me back when I rushed in that day," he stammered, "maybe everything would have been different. I would have realized my mistakes. Emma Carter, I'm sorry. I was wrong." His lips trembled as he lowered his head, tears falling helplessly to the floor. I smiled faintly. "Logan," I said, "a coward who can't face their actions isn't worthy of respect. If you didn't regret it, I might have respected you a little more. But you don't need my forgiveness, because I'm irrelevant to you, just as you are to me. The best thing for both of us is to never meet again." I zipped up my bag and walked out of the dressing room. This time, all the shadows of my past had finally come to an end. After leaving school, I rarely paid attention to news about the others. I heard, through Luna, that Logan's mother suffered massive blood loss during surgery and barely survived. Autumn's family had stormed into Logan's home, causing chaos. After losing his job, Logan couldn't afford the medical bills and had to borrow money from old classmates. Meanwhile, Xavier sent me endless messages through my brother and directly to me. Almost daily, he told me he had broken up with Autumn and asked if I wanted to be the lead in his next film. I never responded. To me, men like Xavier, who used wealth as leverage, were revolting, not charming. I was busy coaching my team for an upcoming competition, barely keeping up with the demands of the job. With just 10 days left before the event, I took the team to the competition venue to adapt to the environment. Paralympic athletes often needed more time to familiarize themselves with the setting. During the journey, I was filled with nervous energy, worrying over every possible mishap. That evening, after settling into the hotel, Luna called me suddenly. "Emma, have you seen the trending news?" she asked urgently. Before I could reply, she hung up and sent me a video. The clip showed Logan's mother screaming at me in the hospital after the earthquake. The video had been edited, cutting off the beginning and end, focusing solely on the part where she accused me of abandoning Logan to die. My indifferent expression was zoomed in and turned into a meme, with the caption, "It's not my problem whether he lives or dies." My identity was exposed, along with the details of my team. Outraged comments flooded in from people who didn't know the full story. If she couldn't even save the people around her, how can she care about disabled people? Maybe she does this on purpose. After all, she's a coach for the Paralympics. The more disabled people, the better for her. She shouldn't be allowed to compete. What kind of heartless coach brings a team to compete anyway? The attacks escalated, targeting not just me but my team members. "Who did you offend?" Luna asked, her voice filled with worry. "This video surfacing now is too coincidental. Someone's clearly targeting you." Her words brought me back to my senses. I immediately searched online for the original post. Underneath the reshares, I found a familiar profile picture. I remembered it well. It was the same avatar Xavier had used in my past life when he posted the photo that drove Autumn to despair. The moment I recognized it, a chill ran down my spine. Xavier's family was powerful. Using such despicable methods to manipulate public opinion was entirely within his capabilities. His motives were now crystal clear. As my mind raced, an unfamiliar number called me. "Emma Carter, have you seen the trending news?" Though the voice was distorted through a modifier, I immediately recognized it as Xavier's. "What do you want?" I asked coldly. "Resign as a coach and join my film. Otherwise, it's not just your reputation that will be ruined. I can ensure your entire team won't be able to compete." The line went silent. I sat alone in the dark room, lost in thought. Xavier had always been unpredictable and unhinged. If I refused, I couldn't imagine how far he'd take this. This was a critical moment for everyone on my team. I didn't want my personal issues to jeopardize the competition they had worked so hard to prepare for. But this job meant everything to me. It was the opportunity one had dreamed of, the role I knew I was qualified for. "Emma, have you thought about where the video came from?" Luna's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. I replayed the events of that day in my mind. Back then, my memory was hazy, but aside from Logan and his mother, there hadn't been anyone else familiar present. Unless someone close to me had deliberately leaked it, no one else would have thought to use this against me. Who could it be? After a moment of contemplation, I dialed Logan's number. "Emma," he answered, his voice anxious. It wasn't me who leaked the video. His hurried denial only deepened my suspicion. "It was your mother, wasn't it?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. The silence on the other end was answer enough. "Emma, I'm sorry," Logan finally admitted. "She's already been through so much. I couldn't blame her anymore. I'll take full responsibility for everything. I'll explain everything. Tell the whole truth." "Okay." I let out a cold laugh. "And what authority do you have to explain? How will you prove your version of events? By the time you manage to clarify everything, the damage will already be irreversible." "What about the full video?" I pressed. "Can you find it?" The only way to quickly end this public uproar was to release the complete footage, including Logan's explanations. The video was bought by Xavier, Logan admitted reluctantly. He paid for all of my mother's medical expenses in exchange for the footage. Now, only he has the right to release it. Hearing Logan's voice, once so familiar and beloved, now felt cold and distant. My phone slipped from my hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud. The provincial team quickly contacted my superiors. The head coach called me personally. I expected reprimands, but his voice was unexpectedly gentle. "Emma, don't panic. We're working on a solution." His words brought back the memory of my interview, where I had said, physical limitations should never be a barrier to pursuing one's dreams. My team members had endured so much to get here. For many of them, this competition was their one and only chance. If they didn't win a medal to qualify for nationals, they'd face the grim reality of returning home to arranged marriages and uncertain futures. This wasn't just my dream, it was theirs as well. Could I really let Xavier destroy everything? "Coach you," I said quietly. "Put the blame on me. I'll step down as the coach so the team can compete without issue. We'll figure things out after the competition." But deep down, I knew that compromising now would leave a permanent stain on my career. It would be nearly impossible to recover from this. Still, looking at my team, who had given everything they had to reach this point, I couldn't bear the thought of being the one to ruin their chances. I packed my things and called Luna. Luna, where are you? I need to. Before I could finish, Luna's excited voice cut me off. Emma, there's been a reversal. Check the trending topics now. News of the full video being released had quickly climbed to the top of the local trending list. In the footage, Logan's tearful explanations and the bystanders' harsh accusations were laid bare. Public opinion shifted almost immediately, turning its focus to the connection between Logan and the mysterious Autumn. Within half an hour, all traces of the trending topic were erased. A mundane entertainment headline replaced it at the top of the charts. It was a swift and efficient cleanup, leaving no doubt that someone powerful was pulling the strings behind the scenes. If Autumn's true identity were revealed, finding Xavier wouldn't be difficult. Clearly, Xavier didn't want the situation to escalate further. But who had released the full video? That remained a mystery. After this incident, Xavier didn't contact me again. Preparations for the competition continued at a rapid pace, and the controversy seemed like nothing more than a minor hiccup in the process. The competition went exceptionally well. My team performed beyond expectations, with all 3 top spots claimed by our athletes. Under the dazzling stage lights, the girls smiled and cheered, pushing their wheelchairs and hugging each other tightly. The mountain girl on our team won the championship. Soon after, advertising companies reached out to sponsor her training expenses for the future. Amid the celebration and applause, I received a call. When I answered, a voice I hadn't expected to hear greeted me. Emma Carter, you're amazing. The voice was distant yet familiar, pulling me back to my previous life. In that dark hospital room, I had suffered from chronic insomnia, unable to sleep through the long, agonizing nights. One evening, a TV program aired a live news segment featuring a reporter's voice, steady and warm, that somehow brought me a rare sense of peace. For weeks, I relied on that voice to lull me to sleep, until one day, the news reported the reporter's tragic death. A fall from the 17th floor of a hospital. They claimed he had been overwhelmed by despair after witnessing too many injured victims during the earthquake. The broadcast replayed clips of his interviews, his comforting tone filled with hope and encouragement. But the more I thought about it, the less the story made sense. Something about his death felt off. Now, hearing that voice again made my eyes well up with tears. We arranged to meet at a small cafe. Did you release the full video? I asked. The man sitting across from me introduced himself as Chun Jing. His round face and calm demeanor gradually overlapped with the cameraman I had briefly glimpsed when Logan's mother confronted me at the hospital. I was relieved that the tragedy of my past life hadn't repeated itself. I did, he said, his voice as gentle as ever, like a stream flowing through my heart. Why did you help me? I asked, still wary. If Xavier had this kind of evidence, he must have ensured the original footage was tightly controlled. It wouldn't be easy for anyone to access, let alone release it. Chun Jing smiled faintly. Let's just say I had my reasons. There was no reason for him to risk offending Xavier just to help me. My daughter is paralyzed, Chun Jing said softly, lowering his head as he began to explain. On the day of the earthquake, we had planned to go to the park together, but I had to leave for an assignment, leaving her and my husband at home. Later, she was crushed under a fallen pillar, and both her legs were broken. And your husband? I asked cautiously. Chun Jing gave a faint, bitter smile. He was at a hotel downstairs with someone else. I only found out about that later. I couldn't help but recall the hospital he had fallen from in my past life, wondering if it was the same place where his daughter had been treated. My daughter loved dancing, he continued, his voice trembling. Her teacher said she had talent and even wanted to recommend her to the best dance school. He paused, choking up. She was so young. How could she accept this? She resisted treatment and was in a terrible mental state. Chun Jing looked up at me, his eyes glistening. During post-disaster reconstruction, I attended your university's fall recruitment event and heard you speak. I told my daughter what you said, and I showed her videos of wheelchair fencing. That night, She cried for a long time. The next morning, she told me, "Mom, I can still dance, even in a wheelchair." Chun Jing's voice broke as he continued. She handed me her suicide note along with that declaration. I stared at him, stunned. If it weren't for you, she might not be here today. And without her, I don't know what would have kept me going. Images of black and white photos from my previous life flashed through my mind. My chest tightened as I realized how much had unfolded without my knowledge. This was an ending I had never foreseen. Xavier contacted me. Chun Jing admitted. He offered a huge sum for the video, but I told him the camera malfunctioned that day. I didn't have the footage. I had heard about his daughter's expensive treatment, as well as his ongoing divorce battle with his ex-husband. He hadn't mentioned any of this, but I knew how desperately he needed money. If it weren't for you, he said firmly, his voice regaining strength, I wouldn't have found the courage to keep going. I used to blame myself, thinking I wasn't good enough to keep my husband or to protect my daughter. But your words reminded me, we were born to be mountains, not streams. Why stop at a small ditch in the path? What I should do is make him pay for what he's done. Chun Jing stood and looked at me, his gaze unwavering. If your story needs a twist and a savior, I hope it's a woman. We don't have to be fools, fighting and bleeding over men. Our arrows can aim at cowards too. With that, he left. The next explosion of entertainment news came while I was attending the wheelchair fencing team's celebration dinner. This time, Xavier was at the center of the scandal. The release footage came from Autumn's birthday party, showing him and Autumn disheveled and scrambling apart. The camera then caught Logan entering with flowers, his face full of confusion and betrayal. The triangle of their relationships was dissected and debated, eventually igniting a storm of public opinion. I didn't know how Chun Jing had managed to obtain the video from Xavier's inner circle, but I knew one thing for certain: those who betray will eventually be betrayed. Those who pursue personal gain will ultimately crumble under their own weight. Autumn's acting career collapsed before it could take off. The internet compared his current face to the one in the video, struggling to reconcile the two. When I saw his recent photos, I barely recognized him. The breathtaking beauty he had once possessed was gone. His manager publicly revealed that Autumn had undergone multiple cosmetic surgeries after his breakup with Xavier, each one worsening his appearance. At barely 20 years old, his face had already become unnaturally stiff, his natural charm completely destroyed. Without his looks, he became a magnet for criticism, his reputation in tatters. Even private remarks he had once made to friends. "Logan, I'm just playing with him. If I don't push Xavier a little, how would he ever feel heartbreak?" were leaked to the media. I didn't know if Logan followed entertainment news, nor did I know how he felt hearing such revelations. The saga ended with Xavier's financial backers being exposed for tax evasion and fraud. One of them, a prominent figure, was revealed to have engaged in numerous affairs. Evidence provided by his ex-wife led to his downfall. He now faced legal consequences. As the news segment concluded, the familiar voice of Chun Jing came through the screen. "This is Chun Jing, reporting live. We'll continue to follow the developments in this case." Her voice was clear and calm, carrying a hint of relief, as though a heavy burden had been lifted. Years passed before I saw Luna again. She returned from studying abroad, now a successful director. To avoid her family's constant pressure to marry, she focused on her career, which unintentionally catapulted her to fame. She approached me one day, beaming with excitement. "That movie about you? It's finally in production." Her class had produced many talented directors, though the once famous Xavier had fallen into obscurity. No one even knew his whereabouts anymore. "Do you have any specific lines you'd like to include in the script?" Luna asked. I wrote a single sentence for her. Many years ago, someone gave up on themselves, telling me, "Life and death are fated. Fortune lies in the heavens." But I want to tell you, your fate is in your own hands, not the heavens. I also requested that the story feature my first group of students as its inspiration. The once skinny, dark-skinned girl from the mountains had since become a Paralympic champion, competing in tournaments year after year. He would send me a photo each time. In every picture, the girl's vibrant smile shone with life, a beauty not inferior to Autumn's, but filled with an unmistakable vitality. Many of the students I had coached were invited by Luna to attend this performance. Those girls often said I was their savior, someone who rescued them from despair and gave them courage to face life's challenges. I could empathize with them, but the truth was, my original goal had simply been to save myself. Yet, in the quiet moments of the night, I would hear the words of that woman in the wheelchair echoing in my mind. A person who strives to save themselves, who works hard to love themselves, radiates a courage they never even realize they possess. And it's this strength the world truly needs. That strength, I thought, is what makes someone the hero of their story. And for once, I was grateful to have become the hero of mine.